So now we're going to take apart the piano. We'll start by lifting the top lid. In order to do that, I'm going to lower the music rack here. We'll push up under the bottom here. And we're going to remove this spot, which is the music desk. There are some brass pins on either side of the edges here, and we need to put those in a safe place so we don't lose them. And then we're going to take the desk off very carefully so we don't scratch the piano. And we'll put that in a safe place as well. And we'll also remove these parts here, starting with this. This is the key slip. Now, I have removed some screws underneath here. Ordinarily, there are 4 screws going up into the key slip. And it just comes off like this. And you can, again, set that in a safe place. And then you have your music key cover, also called a fall board, and again, very carefully setting that down so as not to damage anything. And we'll take a look inside here. So we'll get, before we get some close-up views, I'll just give you an overall view. We'll start at the top. At the top, usually you have the name that's been cast in the cast iron plate in the piano, and a serial number over here, which should tell the age of the piano. You have the tuning pins, and the tuning pins are what help the tuner tune the piano. And those go into what's called a pin block. And the pin block is a piece of wood. Usually they're laminates of wood, hard rock maple. And the tuning pins should be uniformly tight, not too tight or too loose. But if you have loose tuning pins, the piano won't stay in tune. Now, this is something that ordinarily a tuner would need to check, but chances are if a piano's in tune, the pin block's probably pretty good, or if it's a good manufacturer and then the piano's been kept in a good environment. Next you have the strings, and there's several types of strings. You have steel strings, which go to about this point in the piano, and there are sets of 3 strings that each key and each note, each hammer strikes. And then you have a set of 2 strings in what's called the tenor register, and those strings get longer and they're wrapped with copper. And then you have single strings, and these are what you hear in the bass. So you have the bass, you have the tenor, and then you have the rest of the piano here. And where the tenor changes to steel strings, that's called a break point, and often we want to make sure that the sound doesn't change, the quality of the tone doesn't change. On a good piano, it shouldn't change terribly much. And likewise, where the tenor register changes to the bass, you also want there to be a smooth transition. You want the hammers to be in good condition. The hammers are made of felt over a wood molding. And you want them to be nicely rounded. You don't want there to be any grooves in the hammer. You don't want them to be flattened out or loose or wobbling from side to side or missing for that matter. You want there to be all 88 hammers in the piano. Sometimes hammers break or are replaced, and you might notice a hammer that doesn't look uniform. None of these issues in and of themselves are a problem, but they're all things to look at. Next, we have the rest of what we call the action parts, and all these internal parts are called the action. And there are too many individual parts to name. Needless to say, it's good to have a piano technician look at your piano and do what's called a regulation. And regulation is simply taking these parts and making sure that they operate uniformly and also in an optimal way. It's partly a science and partly an art. But there are many leather and felt parts inside the action, and you want them to be in good condition. And you also want to make sure that there aren't any noises, either coming from loose parts or worn parts, or sometimes parts that have hardened, such as leather, and sometimes synthetic parts, such as an artificial leather used to be used in pianos. Generally, you want all the parts to be made of wood. There are some modern manufacturers that use plastic, and there were some manufacturers many years ago that used plastic. I would stay away from those pianos. Some of the modern pianos tend to be good pianos, but nevertheless, wood parts, in my opinion, are preferable and much more easy to repair or replace. Next, underneath you have these small green straps with leather ends, and those are called bridle straps, and those connect the upper part of the action to the lower part. And that's something that often you want to check, see, and make sure there are no broken bridle straps. Next you have the key sticks, and you want to make sure that the keys, again, are evenly spaced, they're of an appropriate height. You want to make sure there's no dust inside or any kind of water that might have been spilled in here. If you notice, there are little silver metal pins that come up through the key sticks, and surrounding those pins are pieces of felt, red felt. And again, we'll get some close-up views of these, but those are called key bushings, and the key bushings keep the keys nicely snug, but not too snug. So you want a little bit of play, you want the keys to move from side to side somewhat. If they move too much, the piano is going to feel sloppy and you're going to lack control. If they're too tight, well, then the keys will stick, potentially. And often in an older piano, these are items that are good to replace. One of the first things that I recommend replacing as well. The keys themselves come up, and you can actually view some of the felt washers underneath the keys. There are felt washers and paper washers or cardboard washers, and those help to build up the height of the key so that the key dip is appropriate. That's the amount that the key will go down, and that the key dip is consistent throughout. So these are some things that piano technicians try to deal with in a regulation that makes the piano feel good and also makes it fun to play. So now we're going to take a look below the keyboard, and I'll show you some things inside the piano that you want to be concerned about when looking for an instrument.